long. Welcome, and I appreciate everybody joining in this webinar called ICPHSO 101. I want to say special thanks to Chris Harvey and Matt Gigg from Sedgwick for hosting the webinar today on WebEx. Hopefully everybody was able to enter without any problem. And we thought that this was a good time just before our annual symposium that takes place in Orlando in February to take a look inside ICPHSO and have a conversation with some former presidents of ICPHSO, ranging back a number of years, just to get their impressions, their ideas, their views on what ICPHSO has done, where it's been going, and what we hope to look for in the future. At ICPHSO, we think our history is pretty important. This is our 30th year, and we've tried to remain true to our mission, bringing in the product safety community together for some nonpartisan, neutral discussions about pending and important product safety issues. So we want to take you back a little bit about our history, but we also want to look forward and give you an idea as to who ICPHSO is and what we're capable of doing. With some quick introductions, I want to get started. I'm Mark Schoem. I'm the Executive Director of ICPHSO, and I started as the Executive Director upon my retirement from the Consumer Product Safety Commission in 2015. At CPSC, I was the dreaded Deputy Director of Compliance and Enforcement, responsible for investigations, product defect investigations, regulatory violations, recall negotiations, all field surveillance activities. So I had some intimate knowledge of the people that were attending ICPHSO, and I always look forward to hearing from those people and meeting them in a area that wasn't at CPSC, and it worked very well for me. With that, let me get some self-introductions from our speakers today, and I'll first turn to Kitty Pilars.
So I'm Kitty Pilars, and I retired last year from Mattel. My position there was Vice President of Product Safety and Regulatory Compliance. So that's how I got to know Mark, and we worked pretty closely together for many years. And I've been involved with ICPHSO almost from the very first meeting.
Thanks, Kitty. And next, Joan Lawrence.
Hi, thanks, Mark. I'm Joan Lawrence. I'm Senior Vice President of Standards and Regulatory Affairs for the Toy Association. And I've been involved with ICPHSO since somewhere in the late 90s, officially. And the Toy Association actually was one of the founding members of ICPHSO. Our president was present at that first legendary meeting. And he was the person who hired me at the Toy Association and really instilled in me from the beginning the importance of this organization and our remaining involved in it and active. So we'll talk more about that as we go through, but thanks for having me.
Thanks, Joan. And then Michelle.
Hello, I'm Michelle Reinen. I'm with the state of Wisconsin at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And my first meeting was back in 2001 when I was a product safety investigator for the state. I serve as the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission state designee as part of that program that they have, and I'm currently the administrator for the Division of Trade and Consumer Protection. And I should also mention that Wisconsin was one of the first states involved in ICPHSO and its founding and origination.
Thanks, Michelle. And last but not least, Al Kaufman. Al, are you there?
Muting myself would help, yeah. Thanks, Mark. Hi, I'm Al Kaufman. I retired earlier this year from the Toy Association, where I was Senior Vice President, Technical Affairs. Prior to that, I've spent more years than I'd care to count in the consumer product safety field with organizations like Toys R Us, and spent more than a decade at the Disney organization in several of its divisions. So I first got involved with ICPHSO probably in the early 2000s, and have been a steadfast supporter ever since. So thank you.
Thanks, Al. And as you can see and as you can hear, there's longevity in the involvement with ICPHSO. So uh, we must be doing something right. And what we're going to try to do in this conversation is kind of talk about what we do right and maybe things that we ought to be changing up. So with our next slide, we did send an email out to people asking you to describe in one word ICPHSO, and it was interesting some of the results we got in that, you know, describing what we do and how we do it. So I think from there, we're going to try to take this to another level, and we're just going to have a conversation. If you have any questions or suggestions or thoughts, there is the chat button function that you can send your message to, and we will try to get to them as we can. We want to try to keep this as informal and as informative as possible. So with that, what I wanted to do is just touch on a little bit about the history, just so for those who may not understand where ICPHSO came from. We were part of a larger organization called the Association of Food and Drug Officials. And because of that organization, there was a group of people within AFTO that were related to or involved with product safety, consumer products. But we felt that we were getting lost because food and drugs always took center stage. So a core number of people, about 20 founding members, actually broke off from AFTO and developed and formed and created the International Consumer Product Health and Safety Organization. The primary pushers behind that was not only the Toy Association, but also CPSC leadership, David Schmelzer and Ross Kozer, who felt that it was important that we not only see the business community and consumers and others when there was a pressing crisis, whether there was an investigation or a recall that was going to take place. But the idea was to meet with different organizations and businesses and consumer and parent advocates away from CPSC during these conferences where we could exchange ideas, network, discuss information, and identify risk and injuries and how to best address them. So over the last 30 years, we've been conference driven. We have 3 conferences that we uh, run every year, one in North America, one day, one the 4-day annual symposium, and then an international in a different country. With that, I want to kind of we can remove the slide now, and I want to turn it over to the speakers to just give me an idea, a sense of why you felt it was important for you to be a part of ICPHSO. Kitty, I don't know.
Mhm.
Sure.
Matt, you can take the slide down now, and we'll just have the views up of the speakers.
So if I can get things started, years ago, I think I recognized the benefit of this very unique gathering of people from all different perspectives in the world of product safety. And it was such a good opportunity to hear from researchers, to hear from doctors, to meet with retailers. Typically, you don't, at least from my perspective, you don't spend a lot of time talking to retailers unless there's an issue on the table. So it was such a unique forum to hear from all these different stakeholders, the very important advocates, test labs. I even found great benefit in ICPHSO in finding consultants, people that were experts on subjects that I wasn't an expert on. So I think it was really the unique blend of diverse people that brought me to ICPHSO and kept me coming back for decades.
Thanks, Kitty. And Joan, I noticed that there seems to be a lot of toy-oriented people as former presidents, although I know that Al and Kitty were involved more with some other products and not just toys. Joan, can you speak to perhaps, why the Toy Association felt it was important to become involved, and certainly recognize that it's not limited to toy makers?
Right. It's not, and of course there are other children's product categories. There are other consumer product categories, and increasingly over the years, um, more and more technical products, for example, electronics and things like that. As issues emerge, the membership has expanded with it, let's say. But for the toy industry, we were an early adopter, if you will, given the involvement of our then president at the time, who saw the benefit of bringing together these groups. And I think Kitty did a nice job explaining like all the different people who could be around the room when you attend one of these events. And we saw the value in that. If you think about toys, everybody, if you went around and surveyed everyone would say they want toys to be safe. Everybody agrees on that. But how you get there and what standards already exist, what laws, what regulations already exist, how you approach toy safety and compliance, how you understand some of the technical requirements, that's where the discussions are happening and need to continue to happen. We would attend in those early years and realize that there were a lot of people who were passionate about doing something about toy safety, but didn't know what standards and federal regulations already existed or voluntary standards at the time existed. And so it was a great way to communicate on what existed, the protections that are out there, and when there were gaps, what was an effective solution to enhancing safety. So around that ICPHSO room, we could find many of the people who were passionate about those topics as we were, and could further those conversations.
Thanks, Joan. And from a regulator perspective, Michelle represents our regulator category. So Michelle, from your perspective, what kind of value did you see in attending ICPHSO conferences?
Well, I'll be honest, during my very first meeting as a brand new investigator, it was just to learn from others. And because a state can stand alone with its regulations back in 2001, but at the same time, there were the federal regulations. So the learning from CPSC and the lawsuits that are happening in relation to that was the greatest value. And then interacting with the regulated community on a neutral platform had tremendous value. We weren't in a situation in a compliance conference and during an enforcement action having to have a serious conversation. We could just be open and neutral and learn from one another about what each had to bring to the table in the situation. And that really helped when it comes to developing new regulations for a state or harmonization as well. So over the years, it's just proved to be just a tremendous value.
Thanks, Michelle. And Al, a number of people have talked to me about the fact that they don't necessarily want to appear with competitors. They're worried about a competitive advantage or disadvantage if they are on a panel or if they happen to say something that might be used against them later on. I don't know if you can speak to whether or not there is a concern or should be a concern about the competitive nature of businesses in attending ICPHSO, or are those overcome through other means?
It's an interesting question, Mark. Clearly a lot of the companies that attend would be concerned about, sharing confidential business information. But frankly, because the organization is focused on consumer product safety, I mean, that's not really a point of differentiation. I mean, everybody wants their products to be safe. And so I think there's wide latitude for sharing best practices without disclosing anything that might be confidential or proprietary. And it actually works very well. I'd also like to go back to something you said where you talked about how ICPHSO sort of broke off from AFDO. Consumer product safety really is its own animal. And so I think that was a really wise move. I think you started to see that, in this country sort of writ broadly back in the 1970s, where there was much more emphasis on safety of consumer products. And I think it was very, very valuable to have a forum where you could talk informally, you could network, you could talk informally with regulators, you could talk informally with competitors, as long as you were careful about what you disclosed and obviously what they disclosed. But worked, I think it was it was unique. It was really, there was nothing else like it. And, to be able to get together with, 6, 7, 800 of your compatriots in the consumer product safety field, paid huge dividends, at least from my perspective.
Thanks. And I think from what you're saying and what the others have been saying, I think that really is where ICPHSO kind of stands out on its own. I think about other conferences that I've attended and that other organizations put on. I'm not sure. I think our model is a little bit different in that we are the ones, the attendees, and you don't have to be a member to attend. But the attendees are the ones that submit ideas to have content at our conferences. So it's not a group of people. I think a lot of people have this mistaken belief that behind me are an army of people. The people that are behind me are the 700 members and attendees of ICPHSO. We are a volunteer-run organization. We've got a management company, and we employ through our management company a meeting manager and a sponsorship manager and a coordinator. But I'm it. Really to work with the volunteers, our executive committee, our board of directors, to develop the content that is of most importance to all of our attendees. And we're fairly unique in that we seek proposals for content for each of our 3 conferences. For our February conference, in which Kim Mason is our planning chair and our incoming president, we've got over 100 proposals that 9 or 10 committees are now reviewing and will decide upon the content. And so that we're not always trying ourselves to come up with the idea or the content, but we rely upon the product safety community. And so that is one way that people can get involved with ICPHSO, is making a proposal, being on planning committees, and we hope that everybody would actually do that. I do want to bring into the discussion the fact that we are an international organization, and I think funny anecdote that Joan Lawrence probably can convey best about our name. I know a lot of people have trouble pronouncing our name, and perhaps Joan can expand on that a little bit.
Sure. There was, it's a wordy name, of course, and it's pronounced ICPHSO, although don't be shy to try to pronounce it and worry about if you get it wrong, because that's part of its charm. There have been efforts over the years to try and revisit that name. Is it too complicated, too hard to say, too hard to remember? And after lengthy discussions on multiple occasions, the board and the membership came to decide that each of the words in the name is so important, and there wasn't one that they could trade out for something else or shorten. And so they decided to prioritize the inclusiveness, the fact that it be more encompassing rather than exclusive, and the fact that the acronym wasn't pronounceable became less of a concern, right? It was more important that it had all of the elements we wanted, so that it was clearly an open forum for this kind of discussion about consumer product health and safety on an international scale.
Yeah, we want the tent to be as big as possible. And I don't think Mark's point can be emphasized enough. In other words, this is not a sermon. These conferences are not a sermon on the mount. They are comprised of presentations that people have submitted because they've said, this is what's important to me. This is what I want to convey to the greater product safety community. And I think, that shows in terms of the attendance, where people look at the program and say, yes, this is something I want to know about. It's something that's relevant to me and to my daily work life.
It may not be a pithy name. It is a conversation starter, though, just the debate about how to pronounce it. But what was more important, that it be all encompassing and inclusive.
Thanks. We know that training dollars within companies and within organizations are limited. So I'm wondering if either Kitty or Michelle can even talk about, how do you convince the powers that be within your company or your organization that there is value in sending you to an ICPHSO conference? Really open for anybody.
Well, I was going to say it's in a number of organizations where I've been, this is, if you're not going to go to anything else during the year, go to the February International Conference, or the annual conference. It will pay dividends far beyond what you end up paying in terms of the expenses to get there, stay at a hotel, and for the conference itself. Certainly the cost of the conference, you get 3.5 or 4 days of solid content, nonstop from morning to night, that is on a par with some one-day conferences I've seen. So it's even though it's a chunk of change, it certainly pays dividends far beyond in terms of value, far beyond what you've spent.
I think the agenda really speaks for itself. When you're trying to demonstrate the importance of this conference, certainly over the years, I had many new bosses who would not be familiar with ICPHSO, but the agenda shows just how much content is there. And even though it may raise eyebrows when you're leaving Buffalo, New York in February to go to Orlando, it is a low-cost destination. And it's easy to get to. And I think ICPHSO has tried very hard over the years to keep costs reasonable. And so I think it's very easy actually to defend why it's important to spend the money and the time attending.
Yeah, I think the conference is open to first timers and those who've been going 20 plus years, 30 years to the organization based on the multi-track platform. So there's something available for everybody. The recall 101 type situation, the hearing from the regulators, the balanced panels that you're going to hear every voice from the different organizations that are there. That neutral setting to have those in-depth conversations, the networking that's available to you outside of the learning. So you'll walk away with those contacts when you need them 6 months down the road on an issue. The resources that you receive as well have always been incredibly valuable following a conference. So it's been an easy sell in that regards. And it's the product safety conference of the year. There isn't competition for this either. I hate to say it. This is the platform people need to be at to learn.
Yeah, be there or be square.
There you go. Picking up on the points just made, the after the conference. How do you use the information that you obtain during the conference afterwards? I think Kitty talked about, you meet consultants, you can meet experts. Michelle said 6 months later, you may very well need to have somebody whose expertise you're looking for. Why don't you talk about the value of the networking and the contacts that you make during the conference? Anybody?
I can jump in from one perspective, the regulatory perspective and the education side of it. If we're trying to put together an education campaign to get the word out on a particular recall or just a safety issue, I have individuals I've met or a resource list where I can call up on a company. I did that with Kitty. I had just met her on my first year, and months later, trying to get an item to get the word out to help the recall effort and keep children safe. And she was able to assist with that. But then when I'm in a regulatory meeting and a company's having trouble with an issue, look, there's a plethora of safety laboratories out there for you to consult with. There's other attorneys available for you to consult with. But there's a number of resources for me to be able to not refer people to specifically, but help guide them, and then guide them back to the conference as well was also an opportunity.
And I think you can, there are really sort of two, I look at it as two forms of that networking. One is, if you have a particular interest in the topic of a presentation, you not only get the information that's been presented there, but you also, at the end, you have the opportunity to go up, exchange contact information with the presenter. If you want to have more in-depth conversations. And, secondarily, I think, one of the nice things about the conference is it leaves plenty of time for between sessions for networking, where there are sort of these, semi-random interactions where you end up not having an immediate need, but I think somebody said, 6 months down the road, it would be very nice to have a contact at, company XYZ or regulator, XYZ, and being able to develop those contacts, I think, has been very, very valuable.
When you mentioned, oh,
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Kitty.
some of the takeaways from the conference are so helpful. The presentations become available after the conference, and many times I would use that information to share within my company important things I learned. I have referred to ICPHSO as, it's the time for product safety people to go for their calibration, because we are together, everybody has a common interest in product safety. Without the influence, sales and marketing people don't go to ICPHSO. It's very different perspectives, but it's all about product safety. So in a way, people, I think, leave with so much information and so much helpful background to help align behind product safety issues.
That's a lot of cool swag.
Well, our bag stuffing is the highlight of our event. The day before the annual symposium starts, we encourage people to come to our annual bag stuffing. And thankfully for our sponsors and our exhibitors, thankfully to them, they do provide a lot of product safety related information and a lot of nice pens, and other items that are of interest to the safety community. So we certainly appreciate that. Something that I've heard over and over again from a number of different companies is, I'm sending my compliance manager. Why do I need to send anybody else to ICPHSO? I don't know if any of you can speak to the need and the importance to send multiple people from within a company to ICPHSO, and why is that important?
Well, I could start the conversation by, the the format of ICPHSO is there are presentations going on simultaneously, and many times there are presentations happening at the same time that I really want to attend. And so it was always very nice to have colleagues there, and we would actually review the agenda and decide who would cover which presentation and take notes so that we could share that information with each other and with people who didn't attend the conference. There's so much information there. It's really hard for one person to keep up, I think.
And I think it's also hard for if one person attends to be able to, convey that information to the rest of the team when they return to their home office. I think having multiple people there, I think not only means that some people will have takeaways that others, didn't pick up on, but it also facilitates a conversation when you get back home. In other words, how can we apply some of the things that we've learned during these presentations?
I would agree with both those comments. And to the extent that you have colleagues within your organization whose functions include anything under the umbrella of consumer product health and safety, whether it's compliance, whether it's standards, whether it's um, product development, all of those kinds of things, they would be applicable to these programs. If you think about the agenda we were talking about, let's say an agenda is talking about something that is an emerging issue in the toy category. While you may not make toys, sometimes that can be an early indicator of product safety issues that are coming down the pike. You may learn something that will translate to your product category. And it gives you sort of a heads up in advance on things you could be thinking about, whether you're in and the same is true for the toy category. We may see and hear something about furniture or electronics, and it may open up a train of thought for us and get us thinking about how might this apply to toys as well.
Thanks. That's helpful. I know a conference with 800 people can certainly be overwhelming if you're a first-time attendee or if you're new to the product safety community. ICPHSO does take that into account during our conference. We do have a first timers new member event. This year it's going to be, or for 2024, it will be Monday, and it'll be a light lunch for first time attendees and new members, along with a diversity, equity, inclusion event or activity that will take place, which is one of the core principles of ICPHSO, that we do believe in DEI, and we do try to practice what we preach with respect to the representation on our panels, as well as our board and our executive committee. But I wonder if anybody could speak to, the impression you had, if you can think back to remembering a first one or two of the first conferences that you attended. We also, before I turn that over to you, we also recognize that it can be overwhelming, and we are trying to do some things this year where we might be able to pair up more seasoned attendees with some of our first time attendees, because we know it can be overwhelming. And also, I just want to put a plug in that, we started, this will be our third year for a student mentorship program. And we will again have a class of 12 students that will be attending, with the hope that we can continue to create individuals in the product safety area who will be of interest in performing product safety functions in years to come. Some of us are getting older and some of us are retiring, and we want to make sure that we're replenishing the supply of people that have to look out for the consumer product. But let me go back to the first time attendee. If anybody wants to speak to that, how you were able to accomplish going to this conference with over 800 people.
Well, I was going to say, I think it was relatively easy for me because I was based in Orlando with the Disney organization, so it wasn't much of a trip for me. But yeah, I think initially it was overwhelming, just the sheer number of people that were there, and the variety of industries and interests that were represented there. I think again, was a little bit overwhelming, but there was a real effort, I think, to make me feel welcome as a first timer, and to encourage me to keep coming, because I think just based on the value and the information that I was able to glean at that first conference, I was sold. So.
Yeah, and I'll admit that my first, I think it was 1999, was the first time I was at the event in Orlando, was intimidating. I had heard about the organization, I knew lots about it, but had never been. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that I was meeting face to face these people whose names I'd known, whether it was a CPSC staff person, or someone from a state, or someone from the toy industry, or someone from another consumer product category. It was suddenly all these people were in the same room, these names I'd heard for so long. And then there were others, and surprised to find out that there were others like me who were initially intimidated, but once you got in there, you realized it wasn't intimidating. These were real people. These were people you could talk to. They were approachable. It's an open forum. So, with a program, but opportunities for networking. And so I was not long intimidated by it.
Yeah, it's easy to feel comfortable very quickly.
And I
Yes.
think what we definitely try to make a welcoming and an open environment so that we're not excluding people, and we try to embrace our first timers and we try to embrace our new members because we do know that they're the future of product safety, and we all are. It's really a passion and an advocacy really to come together and to bring that passion and that knowledge and that expertise and share it with everybody. You know, I talked about the competitive nature of certain businesses and certain organizations, but that seems to be checked at the door, and people really do open up to each other, and they are because they care about product safety, which is not a partisan issue. So that it's we would encourage people, if you are a first timer, if you're a new member, to seek out some of those people who may have attended previously. And that's one of the things that we're looking at of trying to team people up, at least at our 2024 conference, so that you won't feel so overwhelmed and that you'll have a resource that you can turn to. Any other thoughts about how to overcome that fear and get more involved?
So one thing I did with my first conference, Mark, was I attended the bag stuffing at that point, as well as a committee meeting. You know, we had committee meetings following the day at that point in time, so many years ago, but I felt incredibly overwhelmed. Do I know enough to be here? Because I was only months into my new position. And Joan said it well, everybody's just a real person and others are in your same situation. And people were really easy to meet in those little bit smaller segmented groups. It wasn't the room of 800 people. Now we're in a committee meeting of 30, or at that time, maybe 10, you know, for different committees. And same with the bag stuffing. It's just a good time. And you have side conversations, people catch up, people meet new people. And so it was just a nice way to take it down a measure.
Yeah. And I
We
think
also
something,
serve pizza and alcohol and some beers.
yeah,
So
that's right.
you
I was
can't
going to
beat
say,
that.
yeah, I was going to say the great social lubricants. Um, but I think something Joan said bears repeating, which is that, you know, because this is the, you know, must attend event for so many people, you will see people here, you know, at the ICPHSO annual conference, you will not see the rest of the year. And you will make contacts that you couldn't possibly have made any other way, other than, you know, maybe cold calling, which isn't the same as having a face-to-face conversation.
They cut
That's a
across product sectors, they cut across job function. It's really
Mhm.
like no other.
Yeah, and that's a good point, I think. And I don't know if any of you can speak to maybe the side meetings that take place. I mean, I know that there are people that come to ICPHSO looking for a job. Surprisingly enough, you're certainly not going to want to tell your employer that your employer is sending you down to ICPHSO to find another job. Of course not. We would never encourage something like that. But you do meet people. You may be looking for a test lab. You may be looking for an expert. You may be looking for a consultant. You may be looking for a retailer. Maybe you want to
Mhm.
try to market a product. So, I mean, if any of you can speak to additionally the contacts that you're making during the conference.
Yeah, I think Michelle's suggestion about volunteering, you know, sort of throwing yourself into an activity um, created by ICPHSO. Mark mentioned the first timer events, but also ICPHSO has grown to be this very large event that almost entirely takes over the hotel. So chances are, anywhere you go in that hotel, you're going to be standing next to someone who's also an ICPHSO attendee. So there are lots of informal opportunities to meet other people and to talk about, hey, what do you do? What product do you make or involved in? What is your role? There's lots of opportunities to build your contacts and to just have those informal conversations that don't show up on the agenda when you're trying to pitch why it matters to be there, but are so important to why it matters.
Yeah. And you know, the other piece of it that doesn't sometimes get mentioned is the fact that you're creating additional visibility for yourself. In other words, you are making yourself known to the greater product safety community so that you might be a resource for others. or that you might be somebody that someone thinks of when they have a job opening. It's like I met this really sharp person at ICPHSO 8 months ago, and I think I still have his business card. Let me look him up and see if there's an interest there, or her. So
That's a good point. Again, like as we've always, or what you all have been saying, is the ICPHSO model is pretty unique in that it's the product safety community's only real event, and it is global. One thing I did want to address is, why Orlando? Because I know oftentimes it's hard to justify whether you're in Buffalo or Wisconsin, or even in Maryland. Why is it hard? Why Orlando? But again, you don't really want to spend the cold months anyplace else, but also the ease of travel and the cost, especially for international travel, is such that it encourages international travel and it facilitates our attendees coming from abroad, which is one of the main reasons why we chose Orlando 30 years ago to have the conference, the annual conference in February in Orlando. So I do want to at least make people understand or aware that there were reasons behind choosing Orlando, primarily it's a place where you can go. It's a destination. You can bring family. While we don't necessarily have any family oriented events associated with ICPHSO because we're focused really on the primary day job, I know many people do bring their family and they extend their stay either before or after, but also the cost of travel is relatively inexpensive. And you can use that as further justification to those that you need to justify a trip to Orlando in February. But I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that there was some reasons and there was some thinking and thought behind the destination. We're always open to future ideas. So if others have ideas for the future where we ought to be attending, that's something that you can certainly send on to the ICPHSO team, and we'll certainly, consider something.
yeah, there are certainly advantages beyond warm weather in February, or typically warm weather in February. The fact that it is so easily accessible from just about anywhere in the world, and the fact that because Orlando is a region that's a tourism-driven economy, the infrastructure is there. From the airport to the hotels to transportation, it makes it very, very attractive as a location to hold a large conference of this type. Um, I was going to say, Mark, there are some questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to touch on those. One was, I think, do you need to be a member to attend? And the answer is no. There's a non-member rate for attending. We would encourage you to become a member and support the organization, but if you want to dip a toe in the water and come as a non-member the first time, that's perfectly fine. We would love to have you. I think also someone has asked a question from a product design and engineering perspective. What makes attending this conference different than attending ASTM? I don't know if anybody would like to comment on that.
I certainly think, having attended a lot of ICPHSO conferences and many ASTM meetings, there's one of the differences is I think ICPHSO allows for researchers to present their findings on emerging hazards. ICPHSO also often has medical doctors who are speaking about, having treated, injuries in a way that just these things typically are not discussed in this amount of detail at an ASTM meeting. I relied on ICPHSO to help me be aware of what are the emerging issues that haven't really even filtered to ASTM yet.
I think that's a really good answer, Kitty. We'll hear things at an ICPHSO conference from researchers that are sort of the tip of the sphere. They do not, they haven't occurred. Some of them are case studies. They haven't occurred in large enough numbers to become common knowledge. And yet, you have sort of an early warning system where, let's say an emergency room physician is saying, I'm seeing this particular, injury pattern. that tells you something as a product safety professional, that you can take back and use, in your day job.
I think,
Um,
Al, it's also important to talk about the international nature that you hear that type of information, what may be going on in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in Australia as well,
mhm.
that may not yet be relevant to the United States or North America, but it's coming. And it does act as an early warning or an early indicator of something that you might want to focus on. And then that might then progress to an ASTM committee at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I,
And just very on the most basic level, ICPHSO is intended to be educational, whereas an ASTM meeting or set of meetings has a specific goal, and that is to everyone comes together, the multi-stakeholders come together, and the point is to write a standard, to develop a standard. So they have, different end goals, if you will.
Yeah, and maybe a way to think about it is that the ICPHSO conference acts as sort of almost a prerequisite to having those ASTM meetings, because the ICPHSO conference gives you the background injury pattern information, and other information that you can then take, as Joan says, to an ASTM meeting and apply that as you're developing a standard.
Thanks. I wanted to address the member issue. You do not have to be a member to attend an ICPHSO conference, but members do receive a discount to attend the conference. Member advantages, you can also serve as a moderator on a session. Anybody can put in a proposal to have content at our conferences. But if you are proposing a session and you want to be the moderator, we do require that the moderator be a ICPHSO member. Speakers don't necessarily have to be members, but it's also encouraged. Members also get discounts on all the conferences, as I said. They get access to the Career Center. They get access to all presentations going back to whenever we started posting them on our website, whereas attendees who are not members only get the presentation information for a short period of time. So we are always looking to add value to membership, and we've got a strategic plan committee that is looking at various ways to enhance membership, whether it be by having multiple members from the same company or providing additional benefits. Our hope also is that we will in the future be offering additional webinars that might be member based only. We don't like to do that because we think the information that we have is educational and important for all. But at some point we want to try to also enhance our value of our membership. Membership prices are very inexpensive. Our registration prices haven't really changed that much over the years, and we try to keep it low on purpose so that we can appeal to the large amount of stakeholders that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, I wanted to respond to a question I noticed in the chat. Someone had asked whether attendees from testing and inspection and certification industry were also represented at ICPHSO. And if we have not mentioned those specifically, I just want to say absolutely. Testing companies are present and active and members and are a big part of the community. As we have talked about, ICPHSO is open to anyone who has an interest in product safety and health. And so, of course, that includes testing labs.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
if you're looking for service providers, yes, you will find them there. There will be displays, from not only testing and inspection companies, from law firms, from consultants, from some other organizations that are also involved in the product safety field. So I think even just taking a stroll in the supplier area, I think will pay dividends for you.
And that's an important part. We do sell sponsorships. We do sell exhibit booths, but those are kept and maintained in the exhibit area. They're not a part of our content. We don't allow any promotional messages or advertising during our sessions, but we certainly do recognize that without our sponsors and without our exhibitors, our prices, our registration rates would have to be a lot higher. So we do recognize them, and we do provide ample opportunities during our annual symposium and our other conferences for you to go out and visit the exhibit area, to talk to our sponsors, and to see whether or not there might be somebody who can help you with a product safety issue. So I think that that's also a very important point to make. We only have about 7-8 minutes left. I wanted to at least finalize and wrap up with any parting thoughts from each of our speakers. So if you want to impart any words of wisdom, now's the time to do it. Just what your impression is over the years, and any encouragement that you could provide.
Yeah, before wrapping up, Mark, I just wanted to address one final question here that's in the chat, which is, if I can't attend the entire conference, when is the best to attend? And I think, I'm assuming that because someone is asking that question, they probably would be a first timer. And I would say probably the CPSC day, if you're going to attend. I think that's, that gives you a tremendous grounding, not only in the legal underpinning of how consumer product safety is regulated, but it also gives you the opportunity to meet with some of the regulators that you might be dealing with, down the road.
Yeah, and Wednesday of the conference is what we're now calling Regulator Day, since we've broadened it and expanded it, not only CPSC. Generally, the CPSC chair will be a keynote speaker at lunch, and we're looking. We're hopeful that the CPSC chair will appear in February at our lunch, depending upon the status of the government at that time. But we also will have information from European Commission, from the United Kingdom, from Health Canada, especially, so that you get a broad range of regulator points of view. Our hope also, with Michelle's help and assistance, we hope to present some state regulators as well this year on Wednesday. So you're right. If there is one day to choose, it may be the regulator day. As I mentioned, we're looking through the 100 proposals right now, and we hope to have some decisions over the next few days. And as soon as we do have some decisions and we've gotten back to the people who submitted them, our hope is that we will then start posting some information on our website as far as the content. I know a lot of companies hold back until they actually see the content. We've given you out the different categories that we're looking at, but we hope to post some agenda information over the next week or two, so those who need to further justify attendance will be able to see exactly what we are talking about. So with that, Kitty, any parting shots?
We've talked a lot about the value of attending ICPHSO, but I think my parting comment will be how important it is and how helpful it was for me to volunteer and get involved in the organization. I think everybody's day job provides a somewhat narrow scope of what you do, who you interact with, and getting involved in ICPHSO gave me such a broad experience of things I would not have had the opportunity to do. Most of them were good, but it is just a real opportunity, I think, to broaden your horizons as a professional, to get involved volunteering with the conference, the different committees. It was extremely helpful for me.
Thanks, Kitty. Joan?
Similarly, along those lines, I consider it one of those events in my calendar that is a must attend, and I recommend it to everyone, as you probably picked up from all of us here today. You get to talk to people who are outside your typical day in the year, outside of your silo, outside of your sphere of influence, to mix metaphors and geometry. This is an opportunity to talk to people that you wouldn't ordinarily get to see or with or sit next to, and get their perspectives. And in the end, it helps do the job we're supposed to do the whole rest of the year. You build contacts that you will rely on the rest of the year. You build other resources, and it really is important of all of our jobs in terms of product safety and advancing product safety.
Thanks, Joan. Michelle?
Yeah, in reflecting back and listening to Kitty and Joan's responses, I remember every year that I'm there, while it's so much information and you're worried about your day job at the same time, it's that time to really have an opportunity to explore what is happening and create new ideas and create those new contacts that then, as Joan said, last the rest of the year. You get that new inspiration for something you might have been stalled on, or you create that new idea. And so while attending the conference is refreshing for that, it does carry throughout the year based on those contacts that you make and how you choose to engage with the organization and volunteer or attend other events throughout the year.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Michelle. And Al?
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo what both Joan and Michelle said. I think it's an opportunity for you. I think it's an opportunity that you can't get anywhere else, and it's one that will pay tremendous dividends when you return to your day job. You know, you will get some things at ICPHSO that you just can't get anywhere else. So I absolutely would encourage anyone to attend. And I think if you want to, you know, if you want to show up and let's say, you know, just dip a toe in the water, you don't have to join ICPHSO. You can still attend the conference. As Mark says, there's a, you know, a slightly different rate for non-members. And then you can make the decision, but we would encourage you to join and we would encourage you to volunteer because it is a volunteer run organization. I mean, even something as simple as running the mic during a Q&A session is of tremendous value. You know, who knows, maybe you'll be planning a conference sometime in the future.
Thanks, Al, and thanks everybody, all the speakers. I just point out that our upcoming event, we have our annual symposium February 19th through the 22nd in Orlando. And I also wanted to point out that our next North America one-day workshop is being hosted by Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas on June 26th. And we hope that we will also be able to associate some lab tours in Bentonville with that one-day workshop. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your interest in ICPHSO. Feel free to reach out to me either at my email address or at info@icphso.org if you have any follow-up questions or you want to talk further. We thank you for your support and we look forward to seeing everybody in Orlando. Happy holidays.
Yes, have a happy holidays and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.